Hello ladies and gentlemen, it has been a while and welcome back to the channel. Today I finally decided to come out of hibernation and to cook a new video. And I truly apologize for the delay as it has taken me like 8 months to do so. And as you can see, it's been so long that I have taken on a new form. But I assure you I wasn't slacking off during the 8 months. In fact, I was serving democracy. Okay, but for real though, I did do something productive for the channel during these 8 months, and that is by visiting 3 museums in Europe, in Netherlands, Belgium and Switzerland. And of course that is what today's video is all about. Now since piling them all into one video is a bit too overwhelming, I'll be separating them into parts. Maybe 2 for each museum, but that will be figured out later. For now, without any further delay, I hope you enjoy the first part of this long series. The first museum visit was to the National Military Museum in Soesterberg, the Netherlands. This museum was the first airbase in Dutch history in 1913 and a former US airbase during the Cold War. And even though the place was pretty old by its origin, it was actually the newest out of all the 3 museums in this list. And I must say this museum is absolutely jam-packed with all kind of military vehicles. And for me, personally, this is basically a literal gold mine, and it would have been an amazing and a perfect visit if I didn't mess up in the most spectacular way possible. You see, I know my luck. Every museum I ever went to have some kind of renovation going on, and I should have known that this passive skill of mine would activate in my face to mess things up once again. I could have checked beforehand, but I didn't. To add salt to injury, it started renovating the exact day we planned to go, and my family and I attempted to go there right before the renovation starts. Long story short, we failed from extreme unforeseen circumstances. So in the end, we settled for less and go on the renovation day. I was very disappointed to know that the entire tank section was closed off, since that's where all the filming will take place. But it wasn't all bad. It was the first day of renovation, almost everything was actually still in place, and I could see everything I wanted to see. I just couldn't get close to them, that's it. Now that that's all out of the way, it's time to show you around for some highlights. From afar though. Although the renovation was underway, many sections were accessible, and if not, then it can be observed from afar. There's a section on history, vehicles, firearms, uniforms, and so on. There's a bunch more. At first I thought I'd go through the rooms in order, but this video is centered on vehicles alone, so it wouldn't work. So I believe it's best we go from the oldest to the newest vehicles in the entire museum, and I'll pick something interesting from there to show you. Just so I wouldn't be jumping from the mightiest of MBTs to the cutest of tractors. And talking about the cutest of tractors, this place have just that.
Sometimes my genius is... it's almost frightening.
Looking down from the second floor behind some cover sheets, I can see something that's so old it's definitely from the First World War. Here is the Pt.1 made by the French army back in the 1910s. Although not as famous as the British Mark I, the Pt.17 is undoubtedly among the most influential tanks of all time. That is, it's the first to deploy rotating turrets, which would set as standards for every other tank from then on, so this thing can probably be called the second father of all tanks. Thanks to its revolutionary design, it will stay in service in many countries even beyond the First World War. This specific example is equipped with an 8mm machine gun instead of the normal 37 on normal Ft-17s, and it was bought by the Dutch in 1927 for trials, and then it was captured by the German in the Second World War. Luckily it survived the war and it now stays at this museum as a permanent exhibit. This Ft-17 in this museum is certainly an extraordinary and rare exhibit. worthy of everyone's attention. So the next time you see a tank, you can probably guess where the turret's idea even came from. Now moving away from the first floor exhibits and jumping from World War I by about 30 years, we now move into the history room section of the Dutch Armed Forces. Other than some Dutch uniforms and firearms, I can spot some ground vehicles. There's the famous World War II era American Jeeps that have to show up in every World War II American movies. And there's also the British Universal Carrier that is basically the face of the Commonwealth in the Second World War. But besides these two lies something that looks a little tame for what it's capable of.
Let's blow this popsicle stand, boys!
Kaboom!
Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
This little thing here is known as the Goliath, used by the German in the Second World War. It's basically an armored box with tracks that can be controlled via cables, allowing the operator to stay far from the Goliath itself. Now you might question why anyone have to stay away from this toy-looking ROV. Well, it's because this thing is no toy. It's carrying a bomb. Despite the size of just half a meter, the Goliath can carry up to 60 kilograms of high explosive. As such, it was used with terrifying effect during the Warsaw uprisings to destroy buildings housing resistance members, and also to destroy enemy tanks, mostly in the Eastern Front. Although the effectiveness of the latter is questionable, as Goliath rarely reach enemy tanks at all. Despite the low success rate, it's still a terrifying weapon that packs more than meets the eye. For the next one, let's go back to the first floor exhibits. Near the glass wall adjacent to the old airbase runway, I can spot some remarkable vehicles used by the Western Allies during the 1940s. One of these is perhaps the most influential tanks of the entire Second World War. Here is the famous American M4 Sherman, the backbone of the Allied tank force in the West. Born out of a need for a tank with a 75mm gun, the Sherman saw combat in every single theaters of war, from Europe all the way to the Pacific. First arriving in North Africa, the Sherman would eventually become an extremely reliable vehicle with a good all-round specifications. However, the real edge of the tank is in the production capability of the Allies. Thanks to the excellent logistic and production power of the US, the Sherman could be repaired with ease at almost any time. As such, the tank crew were never short on tanks, and infantry never short on tank support. Of course, by late war, the Sherman would be outclassed by better German vehicles, but to roughly borrow a word from the chieftain, who is a military vehicle expert, an infantryman who's under heavy fire doesn't care if the best tank in the world shows up. As long as it actually arrives and can deal with his problem, that's all that matters. And there's actually two Sherman in this museum, with another one being in the middle of the tank section. But this one has definitely seen better days before being used as target practice. Other than the Sherman, the M24 Chaffee was also present. The Chaffee is a late war light tank of the US Army, seeing very little combat in World War II. Even with the same gun as the Sherman, it was quite modest by 1944. But since the Chaffee was meant to replace the older M3 and M5 Stuart's light tank, it was quite an upgrade for US light tank units. The M24 would instead see extensive service in the early Cold War period, with some even serving with the French army. And talking about French tanks during the Cold War, there's one right next to the Chaffee. As part of the French army reconstruction in the 1950s, the AMX-13 air portable light tank was made to be airdropped alongside paratroopers. Although equipped with just a 75mm gun, the tank possessed some novel technologies. That is, the AMX-13 is the first production tank to deploy with an autoloader. With 2 magazines for 12 rounds total, The autoloader would automatically feed rounds into the gun breech, giving the AMX-13 an insane fire rate of 10 shots per minute. Furthermore, the tank also uses an experimental oscillating turret, where the turret is separated into two parts, with the gun staying with the upper turret. This has some benefit as the gun can depress more and larger armaments could be fitted onto a small vehicle, as the gun no longer takes up any hull space, allowing for impressive upgrades in future variants like this one here at the museum equipped with a 105mm gun. However, these experimental designs do come at a cost. Once the rounds are used up, reloading the magazines can take quite a long time, and using two-part turrets means that the AMX is not properly sealed against the environment, and more importantly nuclear chemicals, which is a pretty big deal during the Cold War with all the nukes lying around, and probably the reason why oscillating turrets have fallen out of favor in modern days. But this hasn't stopped the AMX-13 from being a very successful export tank, seeing service in more than 26 countries and still serving to this day. And generally, it's a pretty successful light tank with a good specification for its time. Now since we're looking at Cold War tanks, let's head outside to the museum entrance. There we can find an extraordinary main battle tank that's definitely one of my favorites. When the Bundeswehr or the West German Army was formed, they were in need of a new MBT to supply their new army. This would mark the revival of domestic German tank development since the end of World War II, and with that the legendary Leopard 1 main battle tank was born. Entering service in 1965, the Leopard 1 has an interesting design choice, by focusing purely on high mobility and firepower. The tank has a 105mm Royal Ordnance rifled gun, a very potent cannon that's more than a match for Soviet tank of the era. What's more impressive about the Leopard 1 however is its speed. At full power the tank can reach 65 km per hour, which was very fast for a 1960s MBT. However, the drawback is quite obvious. Because the Leopard 1 was designed with the knowledge that anti-tank ammunition at the time, specifically the heat shells, can easily penetrate any conventional tank armor, the designer believed focusing on protection is not worthwhile. As such, the armor is made thin on purpose, with the front plate being just 17mm thick. And the tank would specialize in speed and firepower instead to cope with the thin armor. But even with the drawbacks, the Leopard 1 was very popular with Western nations, and many countries would purchase it, including the Netherlands. Of course, later variants would be upgraded with better armor and system to give the Leopard 1 more protection. This one here at the museum is a Leopard 1V variant, with extra turret armor. And for this tank specifically, I must say I'm quite glad that it's a gate guardian outside the building. Otherwise there won't be a single tank in the museum for me to see up close during my visits. But my visits during the museum renovation wasn't all bad either. One of the vehicles was actually on the move outside in the old runway, and I managed to snap this video. This is a Pt.1 self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicle equipped with double 35mm autocannons for fighting enemy aircraft. And as you can guess, it shared the same hull as the Leopard 1, and it would share the same mobility and speed as well. So in the end, I get to see two tanks up close instead of one. Not too bad, I guess. Now some of you might not know what an MBT or main battle tank like the Leopard 1 is, and the next one would definitely answer your question. Going back inside down in the restricted tank section is a tank that jumpstarts the whole MBT concept. Here is the British Centurion Mark 5/2. Originally, the Centurion were built to fight German heavy armor during World War II, but the tank would end up facing Soviet Cold War era tanks instead. As the first MBT or main battle tank, the Centurion would mix mobility, armor, and firepower into a single vehicle, eliminating the need for tank types like light, medium, and heavy tanks, as they are merged into one vehicle. Other than setting new standards for tank warfare, the Centurion is a very capable and a versatile tank, thanks to the numerous upgrades keeping the tank competitive throughout the Cold War, which is reflected quite well in this tank in the museum, which is a Mark 5/2, a variant of the Centurion upgraded with a 105 Royal Ordnance gun, the same gun as on the Leopard 1. The Centurion would saw service with numerous countries as it was a major export vehicle, and the tank would experience major combat during the Cold War as well, especially in the Middle East. One major example of its combat effectiveness would be during the Yom Kippur War of 1973, where at the Golan Heights, 105 Israeli Centurion would defeat a much larger force of 500 Syrian T-55 and T-62 tanks, with one of these Centurions alone destroying around 20 tanks with no friendly support. With its combat record, the tank would cement itself as one of the most effective and battle-tested tank of the Cold War. Before we move on to a final highlight, I would like to remind you that there's still many more ground vehicles in this museum that I have not mentioned, since there are simply too many to cover in one video. As such, I would like to give some honorable mentions to the vehicle that did not make the final cut in this video. That's the M113 C&V Recon vehicle, the legendary M109 self-propelled howitzer, and finally the Mark 61 105mm self-propelled howitzer, which is based on the AMX-13 hull. These three and many other are really unique in their own way, and I wish I could give them more screen time, but because the video is getting long, I have to cut their parts out. Maybe one day they'll make it into other videos. But without further ado, let's have a look at the most modern tank in this entire museum. Even as the Leopard 1 barely entered service in West Germany, research in the new and improved MBT was already ongoing. After a failed joint project with the United States in the MBT-70 program, West Germany would continue tank development by themselves using lessons learned from the joint project, culminating in the Leopard 2 main battle tank in 1979. As an improvement to the Leopard 1, the Leopard 2 would enhance many aspects of its predecessors, which is shown relatively well in the A4 variant, the most common variant used during the Cold War. The Leopard 2 A4 is equipped with a 120mm L44 Rheinmetall cannon, which is quite an upgrade from the older 105mm. Furthermore, the armor was enhanced significantly, where the thickest part of the tank armor could be as much as 800mm thick. And even with all that armor, the Leopard 2 could still achieve a speed of 70 km per hour. With its impressive specification, the tank would be operated by many nations, including the Netherlands. And many Dutch A4 would be upgraded into the Leopard 2 A6, like the one here at this museum, which is a post-Cold War upgrade in 2001, adding sophisticated composite armor and a new and improved 120mm L55 Rheinmetall cannon. With all these specifications, it would be easy to conclude the Leopard 2 as a formidable main battle tank with few rivals. However, the lack of actual combat deployment and tank-on-tank engagement compared to its contemporary mean that the true capability of the tank is yet to be seen. But as more Leopard 2 are deployed to fight in the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian war, perhaps this fact could be changed very soon. I guess only time could tell.